For these problems, we're going to factor out the GCF, and it just so happens that for these, we're going to have more than just a number to factor out. We're going to have a variable in this as well. So first of all, we want to identify what the GCF is for this. So we want to look for a common factor in each. Now there's a -3 that's here. Now I know that -3 does divide into -21. So I know for sure that part of my GCF is going to be -3. But what I also notice about that is I have x squared and I have an x. The most that I'm going to be able to factor out will be the lowest power of x that you see here. In this case, the lowest power of x would be x to the first power. And so now that is the GCF that I'm going to factor out here. To find out what goes inside the parentheses after you factor that out, you're going to do division again. So we're going to take -3x squared, which is the first thing we see here, and we want to divide it by -3x. That was our GCF. If you divide this, the -3's cancel out, and if you have x squared divided by x, we're just going to get 1x left over inside. Now, because we're pulling out a negative, we have to be careful here because we have -21x. We're dividing it by -3x, the GCF. Notice here, negative over negative is going to give you a positive, and the x's are going to cancel out. So you just get x plus 7 here in this case. Again, you can always multiply this back through to see if you did it correct. And if you multiply and distribute this through, you will get what you started with. So that's correct. So the reason why we did factor out negative is because it actually says in the instructions, factor out -1 if the leading coefficient is negative. So that's why we did that. Okay, so the next one, we don't have any negatives to deal with here, but we still have to deal with the 63 and the 21. So if you're not sure about what to pull out, of course, you can always do factor trees again, like I'm going to do here. So 63 is 9 times 7, or 3 times 3 times 7 we have there. And then 21 would just be 3 and 7, and that's all we can do on that. So for 63, we have 3 times 3 times 7. And then 21, we just have 3 and 7. Notice here that 3 and 7 are common on this one. That means that the GCF between these two numbers is actually going to be 21. So I know 21 is part of my GCF. Now, also, as I mentioned earlier, you're going to use the lower power of x. So the most I can pull out would be x squared. So that's going to be what I'm going to factor out. That's my GCF. What you're left with inside here is you're going to take 63x cubed divided by 21x squared. So 63 divided by 21 is 3. And then I have cube and a square there. That's just going to become a 3x. Then we have plus. Now for this, notice that we're actually factoring out the same thing as what the second term is. So you're still taking that last term divided by the 1 up front. Now when you do, you get the same thing top and bottom. That's just going to turn into a 1. So you'll have 3x plus 1 inside the parentheses. Again, you can always multiply that back through and check your work to see if you got what you originally started with. Okay, let's do one more of those. Now this time we have 2 negatives again, so I do want to pull out a negative. And I want to work with 54 and 18. So 54, 6 times 9. And then we have 2 and 3. And 3 and 3 we have there. For 18, we have 2 and 9, and then 3 and 3. So for 54, I've got 2 times 3 times 3 times 3. And then for 18, I have 2 times 3 times 3. If we take a look at this, we're going to look at the ones that match. That's going to be 2 times 3 times 3. If you multiply that, that's going to give you 18. Okay, so 18 will be what we're going to factor out. Of course, we need the negative out front there as well. So I'm going to do negative 18. Now we have to look at the x's. Whatever the lower power of x is, that's the most we can pull out. So it's going to be 18x squared. What goes inside this parenthesis, we're going to take negative 54x cubed divided by negative 18x squared. So we have negative over negative. That's going to give you a positive. So if you take negative 54 divided by 18, that's going to leave you with a 3. And then x cubed divided by x squared is going to give you an x. So 3x. Then to get the other part that goes over here, we're going to take negative 18x squared divided by the GCF, which is also negative 18x squared. Now that is going to divide out to give you a positive 1. So I'll put a plus 1 there. And that's going to be what goes in for that. Again, you can always multiply this out to see if you got it correct. And if you do, if you multiply this, that will give you the negative 54x cubed because you're adding the powers. And then you have minus 18x squared. So that would be fully factored.